Hello and welcome to Mr. C History. I am at Carisbrooke Castle on the Isle of Wight. Now this place has a long history and a long connection with the royal family, with kings and queens of England. William the Conqueror came here and personally arrested his half-brother Otto, and Queen Victoria was a regular visitor here. But my main focus is just 2 years, 1647 and 1649, and one king, King Charles I. He was arrested and he was imprisoned here for 2 years just before his final execution. So what I'm going to do today is to see why he was here and how it came to be, these events, what his life was here and how his behaviour here led to his eventual downfall. So come along and join me. So how has it come about that Charles ends up here at Carisbrooke on the Isle of Wight? Well, the year is 1647, November to be precise, and by then Charles has essentially lost what is known as the First Civil War. Indeed, he's actually imprisoned, albeit in Hampton Court in one of his royal palaces in quite nice luxury, and Parliament aren't sure what to do with him. Now, Parliament is ravaged by different groups. There are those who are sort of still keen on having a slight king, constitutional monarch, etc. And there are those led by Oliver Cromwell and the New Model Army who are dead against having any king and want Parliament to reign supreme. So with them bickering, Charles actually manages to escape. He escapes Hampton Court. Now, where is he going to go? There was one thought he might join his wife, Henrietta Maria, in France. There are other things he might run off to various different royalist strongholds, but oddly, he chooses the Isle of Wight. Why? Well, it's obviously distant from Britain. It's going to be slightly easier to defend himself, and he thinks there might be loyalists there. Indeed, he's got wind of a man called Colonel Robert Hammond, who is a moderate, sometimes has parliamentary beliefs, but also sometimes has royalist belief. So he sends a few people over to the Isle of Wight to check this guy out, and they come back saying, yeah, maybe he looks all right, maybe we can trust him. So Charles, in the middle of the night, sneaks across the Solent, gets to the Isle of Wight and knocks on the door of here at Carisbrooke Castle. And Colonel Hammond says, yes, come on in, Your Majesty. And as he leads him into the courtyard here, Colonel Hammond turns around and bolts the door. And he turns back to Charles and said, I'm so sorry, Your Majesty, but you are actually under arrest and you are my prisoner here at Carisbrooke. Now, why would Robert Hammond do this? Well, there's a bit of debate amongst historians. There are some historians, maybe royalist ones, who say he was a double-crosser. He just lied to Charles the whole time, says, yes, I'm a royalist, but in reality he was a die-hard parliamentarian, was always going to report him. There are others who are slightly more mixed and say, actually, Charles just misjudged him. I think Charles was in a desperate situation and so was keen to believe anyone. And the Robert Hammond didn't really say anything. He sort of said, all right, okay, fine, yeah, come on in. And perhaps dilly-daddled a little bit and finally thought, I need to pick a winner here, and maybe saw the writing on the wall. So what was life like for Charles as a prisoner here at Carisbrooke? Well, in the first few months, pretty good. Hammond treated him very courteously. Everybody called him Your Majesty. He had lots of servants and people who could be with him, 2 chaplains to go to and pray with him and go to church with him. Hammond even brought in furniture and tapestries from Hampton Court, where he'd been previously, because of course all prisoners need a tapestry. And he also famously had these really lavish suppers, 20-course dinners. So he wasn't really in due hardship. Yes, the doors were locked and he couldn't leave, but he had relative freedom. Hammond even made him this bowling green. Apparently Charles was sports mad and loved bowling so much that he flattened this bit of land here. And Charles was able to walk on the ramparts, etc., all fine and dandy. There was one other freedom he was given which actually led to a bit of his downfall. He was given freedom of letters and pens and communications. People could actually come and go, come and see him, which ultimately meant that Charles was scheming and planning escape attempts or various different other sort of nefarious and revolutionary things. He would write letters off to the different parliamentary factions to say, why don't you actually fight each other? Come and support me. He would write to people in France or maybe elsewhere in England trying to get money. He even also wrote to the Scots and wrote something called made a deal with them, the engagement, to say, actually Scotland, why don't you come and join me again? You don't want to go with Parliament anymore. He even managed to organise a revolt in Newport, just the town over there as well. It was quickly quashed, but soon enough Parliament found out about all of this and said to Hammond, look, enough is enough. You've got to treat this man as the prisoner that he is. So after all that, conditions got stricter and harsher for Charles. It was already quite a very hard castle to escape. Not forgetting, of course, it's already on an island. So what Robert Hammond did, he really slashed his staff. Only 30 staff to attend to the king, unbelievable. They restricted a lot of his walking around, etc. A lot of the correspondence, all his letters were now going to be read. And crucially, he was going to be watched by guards at all times. Even asleep at night, 2 guards were ordered to lie in front of his bedchamber, lie down and sleep there. He could not go anywhere. He was under such strict scrutiny. Despite all that, Charles still manages to get messages out. He was writing letters in code, in cipher, amazingly. He still had a few royalists on his side and was still sending correspondence, trying to stir up rebellion, etc. And of course, he was trying to escape. There were 2 really significant escape attempts by Charles in the spring of 1648. The first one, he tried to break out of a window, but there were bars on it and he got stuck. He got trapped. I think all of these 20-course meals were perhaps making him a bit too large, so he got trapped. He had to abandon that one rather ignominiously. The second one in the May of that year was a bit more significant, and it took a long time to build up because he was getting sent things secretly into the bedchamber, things like a hacksaw and oddly nitric acid. I don't know how you transported that in the 1640s. Anyway, with the aim of trying to get rid of cut off or dissolve in acid the bars of his jail. This is like something you hear about in a cartoon, but it did actually happen. He tried to do this. Now, Hammond had also his spies within the king's court, and Charles had actually bribed a couple of the guards to get onto his side to help him, but of course they double-crossed him, and they actually told Robert Hammond the whole time, oh, what, by the way, he's trying to dissolve these bars in acid, ha ha. So Robert Hammond, and to great dramatic sort of conclusions, the moment when he could hear Charles trying to scratch away with his hacksaw on the bar, he burst his way through, and Robert Hammond said to Charles, oh, I hear you're going to leave us, you're on your way. Dramatic stuff, you can imagine it in a film, but another failed attempt. And I think by now, by the May of 1648, the writing is on the wall for Charles. He realises his time might be up. There is a glimmer of hope, though, that he has. Well, that great hope was the Scots and Scotland. Remember, Charles had written them a letter saying, please, can you come and help me? And extraordinarily, they did. They'd invaded Northern England, invaded Parliament, the parliamentary forces, and were fighting them. Charles didn't know a lot of what was going on, obviously, because his communications were restricted here. So he had a bit of hope. But sadly, by August of 1648, those hopes are dashed because at the Battle of Preston, of course, Oliver Cromwell and the New Model Army defeat the Scots. The Second Civil War is over, definitive now. It is, the writing is on the wall. Charles knows his fate. Interestingly, the Parliament is still undecided what to do with him. And they actually have a meeting in Newport, the town over there, and they discuss with Charles to say, well, what, do you want to be a monarch? Do you be, but with no power, just a ceremonial thing, and Parliament has it all? And he says no. Eventually, of course, Oliver Cromwell gets more and more powerful within Parliament, and he is no lover of the king, of course. And so by the Christmas of 1648, it is fairly sure that Charles is going to be executed. And sure enough, end of January 1649, Charles is executed at Whitehall. You'll have There is one other sort of sad connection that Charles has with Carisbrooke, and that's his children, Henry and Elizabeth. Charles had several children, but Henry and Elizabeth were his youngest. Now, after the death of Charles I, his eldest son, Charles, who will eventually become Charles II, he was trying to mount revolts in Scotland and things like that. And so Parliament were a little bit wary of having his children around. They were worried that a monarchy might return. So to have all these royals around is not such a good idea. They didn't know what to do with them all. Now, one suggestion was to send them back to their mother on the continent, but again, that's a bit risky. So what they decided to do was imprison them, Henry and Elizabeth, here at Carisbrooke. And so sure enough, in 1650, just a year or so, a few months after the execution of Charles, the two children come here. But unfortunately, Elizabeth was quite a sickly child, and apparently the crossing on the Solent in the 1640s wasn't as nice as it is now, and she developed a cold and pneumonia, and actually she died aged 14, 8 weeks after arriving here in Carisbrooke. So quite another sad tale for Charles and his family here. So there we go, Charles at Carisbrooke. I actually feel slightly sorry for Charles here. I think, yeah, he didn't behave terribly well, and he was very naive, and he perhaps believed too much in people. But I think he was trapped, and he felt desperate, and so that's why all these escape attempts and some of these slightly odd bits of behaviour took place. And so it's quite an interesting decline for such a majestic person that the king was, or certainly felt that he was. Anyway, as always, I hope you've enjoyed that. Please let me know what you think. I'll see you on the next one.